Hello, I'm back. So, last week, I'm sorry, I made a video, but it was really shit. I didn't want to put it out. And I actually picked really well. I went 12 for 14. The only fights I got wrong were the Michelle Pereira fight. I don't know why I really backed him, and the Giga Chikadze fight. I backed Giga. Both of them kind of laid some eggs. But I've had the hot hand recently. So, with that knowledge, we're going to go forward into UFC Fight Night Des Moines Sandhagen versus Figueiredo. Right? I'm going to break down the whole card, starting here, the early prelims, ending with the main event. So if you don't want to hear me break down fucking Juliana Miller versus Ivana Petrovic, and you want to get to the good shit, just skip ahead probably till there's about 5 to 10 minutes left, and then that'll probably be the good part of the main card. But if you want to get the whole ride, learn everything about betting tips, I've been making a lot of money recently. This is where you want to start. So, first fight of the night, Juliana Miller versus Ivana Petrovic. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, there's a 50-50 fighter. And you're kind of like, okay, like Derek Lewis. And it's like, but they were fighting in the rankings. Juliana Miller is literally a 50-50 fighter. All of her wins have come from the Contender Series. Ivana Petrovic, she's pretty good. I don't think she's the best, but she gave Jamie Lynn Horth a pretty good fight. I just don't think really highly of Juliana Miller, so Ivana Petrovic. But this is pretty low-level WMMA, so don't put your life savings on this, but Ivana Petrovic should be good enough to probably get a nice little decision win over Juliana Miller. The line's wide, but it's very justified. So, this fight, I'm going to have my first upset pick of the card. I like Dontel Mays here. A lot of people are picking Peterson because he took down Shamil Gaziev and he beat up on Muhammad Usman. But both of those picks, I think, lack context, if that makes sense. Thomas Peterson, when he beat Muhammad Usman has slowly taken tools away from his own game. For example, he used to be able to wrestle. He does not shoot takedowns anymore, right? After the Tafa fight, he took that out of his game. It was too easy. The motor was winning too easily. So he took that out of his game. And then against Thomas Peterson, he took out like a lot of his striking thing. Like he used to throw like a Superman punch if you watch the Mick Parkin fight. And against Thomas Peterson, he basically just stood in front of him and just threw like an occasional shot. And Peterson beat him up. I think Shamil Gaziev, he just kind of took him down, but didn't really do anything. He popped right back up and slumped Peterson. People are really low on Mays because Mays, every time he fights wrestlers, he struggles a lot, but I think you need a little bit of context. So I think people are even looking back to the Hamdi Abdel Wahab fight, but Hamdi probably should have lost. It was kind of a gross decision. Hamdi is like low-key a dodgy decision merchant. And against Shamil, he survived. I think, what's going to change between then and now. Like, we just saw Mays do way better. And even against Walter Walker has a submission game, and Walter Walker, I think, is a better athlete. Like, Peterson, he's also very fat. That doesn't mean you can win. That means that doesn't mean you can't win at heavyweight. But against Dontel Mays, he's a real athlete who's a real heavyweight. Peterson being fat and slow and having like no power because he's a bit of also a pitter pat merchant. Dontel Mays should be able to beat him. Peterson also, he doesn't really shoot takedowns. The only time we've just really seen him go for the grappling was against Shamil Gaziev, and that has looked bad. So even if he shoots takedowns on Dontel Mays, I actually think Dontel Mays will be able to get up. Even if Thomas Peterson gets the grappling going, Dontel Mays, for how bizarrely unskilled he can be, is a pretty great athlete. Like, he will have stamina at the end of the fight when Thomas Peterson might be gassed. I actually really love Dontel Mays here. Plus 200. I love it. Dontel Mays, decision, KO, doesn't matter. Thomas Peterson is too fat to be a pro athlete. Thank you. Now, Gaston Bolaños versus Quang Bang Lee. So, the line is a little bit crazy close. Gaston Bolaños, last time out, went up there against Cortavius Romius. Romius got the takedowns, but as the fight wore on, Bolaños kind of was a better grappler, if that makes sense. Like, we know him as a striker. He's a Muay Thai kind of guy. He's going for the home runs, but he was out grappling Cortavius and then kind of just beating him up a little bit on the feet. Romius had success taking him down, but Bolaños was able to kind of be the better fighter with better stamina and he did well for himself. Quang Lee, Quang Lei, he came off of LFA, short notice appearance against Christian Gutierrez, and he looked pretty good in the first round, and then Gutierrez locked the fuck in and then easily outscored Lei. So people were pretty high on Lei. And then he had his next fight against Long Xiao, and he got slumped by Long Xiao, who was a grappler. He didn't even get a chance to grapple. He just got blown up. And I feel like Quang Lei just isn't UFC caliber when Gaston Bolaños has legitimately great striking. So although I don't love Quang Lei, I'm going to take Gaston Bolaños here, probably by decision. I just think that if he does go for the grappling, we haven't seen like any good jiu-jitsu or anything special out of Quang Lei. Gaston Bolaños should just be able to keep the range and even then look for the home run shots to knock out Quang Lei. Quang Lei claims 5'6". He looks smaller in there. Gaston Bolaños should be skilled. I just don't really see an avenue for victory. If this fight was priced at minus 250, I would still think it's pretty fair. So I like Gaston Bolaños. I'm not like saying you put your mortgage on him, but I think he's a fairly confident pick for me here. Quang Lei, I just don't think he belongs. Okay, Marina Rodriguez versus Jillian Robertson. So, I'm going to come out ahead right now. Jillian Robertson's the pick. She's a grappler with great jiu-jitsu, and Rodriguez just gets taken down back to back to back to back to back to back. So you got to pick Jillian Robertson. But the odds are fucking ridiculous because Rodriguez, you look at that 1-4 and you think, God, this woman must suck. She's not that bad. In her 2 fights ago, she split decision with Andrade, really close. WMMA decision, who cares? Last fight against Yasmin Lucindo, it was basically the Jose Aldo fight, but if nobody cared about Aldo, right? She won it. Lucindo looked lame. She took her down, but she couldn't do anything, and Rodriguez was outstriking her. And in Robertson's last fight, there were some points where it looked a little scary, like she wasn't going to get the takedowns and her striking looked putrid. So, if this fight stays on the feet, this is an easy Rodriguez win. I think, though, Robertson's finding her right at the right time, and she'll probably be able to get the takedowns. I think Rodriguez is probably just going to look a little old, and she can win 2 or 3 rounds. There's probably also a submission upside, so Robertson is the pick, but the line should be minus 150. From a betting perspective, I have a very small bet on Rodriguez just because I'm like, this line's fucking ridiculous. Because if this fight has 2 rounds where half the round is on the feet, Rodriguez will probably win a split decision, right? Like, she's that much better on the feet than Jillian Robertson, especially a Jillian Robertson who lost to Tabitha Ricci, which is a huge concern at strawweight. Tabitha Ricci, she's not got great takedowns. She's not like a special fighter. To lose to Tabitha Ricci, we don't like that. And Rodriguez, let's say she gets both those 2 decisions. Like, that's just the judges. The fights are the exact fucking same. This fight is probably lined even, and Rodriguez is considered like a top contender and should be in a number 1 contender fight. If just 2 judges change their cards, right? So I'm picking Robertson, but I think the line's fucking ridiculous. So don't bet on this fight. If you are betting on this fight, Rodriguez is a good value, but generally speaking, there's a lot of fights like this on this card. And this is another one. So, Azamat Bekaev versus Ryan Loder. Ryan Loder of Ultimate Fighter fame. Azamat Bekaev of being a really good fucking fighter fame. So, starting with Ryan Loder. Ryan Loder, All-American wrestler. Super fucking phenomenal grappling and wrestling skills. Even when he's on the mat with you, he will look for shit. Like, he's not one of these fucking bums who are going to just cuddle you and you're watching with your friends and you're kind of like, you know what I mean? They're giving you a look like, I don't think we should be watching this together vibes. No, Ryan Loder's going to actually do shit, which is really good. And his win over Robert Valentin in the Ultimate Fighter finale, I think is better than any win that Bekaev has by like some margin. But we have a lot of questions about Ryan Loder. He's 33 and he's only 7-1. Bekaev, he's had a weird career where pretty much the UFC didn't want to sign him because they're like, he's a boring wrestler. And so they didn't get him on not the Ultimate Fighter, but the Contender Series. But then he kept winning. And then they needed somebody, so they called him, and they're like, oh, fuck, we got to have Bekaev. And he looked really good against Zach Reese. The stoppage, low-key, also knocked out Zach Reese. He caught one of the Dustin Poirier People's Albums. Hold on. Elbows. There we go. I'm struggling. And both these guys are phenomenal wrestlers. I think, though, I like Ryan Loder's wrestling more. But Azamat Beklev has some fucking nice hands. Like, he hits pretty hard. When Ryan Loder, we don't know what his striking is because he does not waste time there. So, because when you have two wrestlers who I think are both really high level, you got to go with the guy who has a bit more striking. So I like Beklev. And these Russian wrestlers, you know what I mean? They usually are a bit more well versed in the arts versus Ryan Loder, who's a much more later life adapter to MMA. So I think on the balance of things, I like Beklev here. I think if stuck on the feet, he can probably knock out Ryan Loder. But I think the grappling, wouldn't be shocked if Ryan Loder was a better grappler. So, yet again, the line is fucked, right? This line should be at most minus 200 for Beklev, just from the perspective that he's got the OV in the end, or the OIV at the end, and that he is on a good run, that he was LFA champ, and that I think a lot of people are kind of just looking at Ultimate Fighter versus Russian on a crazy tear. And I think you got to look a little deeper. I actually have a bet again on Ryan Loder, because I think if Ryan Loder gets a takedown and then kind of makes Beklev look bad on the mat, I would not be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked if Beklev shoots a takedown and gets reversed and Ryan Loder, people start thinking he's the real Bo Nickel, right? I would not be shocked if these things were to take place. So I like Beklev as a straight up pick because I think he's probably a better striker, and I think the wrestling will cancel out. Like, I think that these guys won't be able to be held down. I bet you they're both great scramblers. They're both really good in these spots. And when that happens, you kind of got to look at the striking. And I think Beklev, just within the last year at LFA, he has like a pretty nasty KO. And he's not a great striker, but compared to Ryan Loder, he's going to be pretty good. So Beklev, for pick, money, Loder. Don't put your money on Loder. Sorry, don't put your life savings on anyone here. You're going to see minus 400. You're going to think it's a lock when this fight is very close. Yana Santos versus Miesha Tate. So you got the battle of the retirement home. Miesha Tate retired, came back, hasn't looked good. Her only win in that time being against Avila. But if you see Avila looks like somebody who thinks that MMA is still in the Tank Abbott era. Like, if you watch her fight with Cavalcanti, it's kind of like, oh my god, like, who is this who let their mom in the cage? So I don't really rate that win. And Yana Santos was on a pretty bad losing streak, but against Chelsea Chandler looked good. But Chelsea Chandler's shit, so what does that even mean, right? So my pick, Miesha Tate is a good wrestler, but another underdog pick for me. I like Yana Santos here. Yana Santos has been competitive. She's been more active, and I think Miesha Tate, like, I think, you know what I mean? She's one of these people who's like, I think she almost forgets that she's on the roster herself. I think Yana Santos takes this more seriously. I think Miesha Tate's old. She's retired before. I don't even like, you know what I mean? She gets a fight and you're like, what? She's on the card. She's alive. Good for her. So Yana Santos is the pick. This is very close though. This is somehow within the rankings pretty low level at this point, because you got old wrestler who's probably the game's left her behind, and Yana Santos who's not been good. But I think when you look at it from the lens that Yana Santos recently has had a split decision with Carol Rosa, and if Carol Rosa was to fight Tate, I would be like, yeah, Carol Rosa, duh. And so I know it's a little bit MMA mathy. I like Yana Santos. I have no confidence at all on this fight. If Miesha Tate can kind of just wrestle her up and take it to a dodgy split decision, I would not be shocked, but I have to go with the dog. We're making great time. So now we get to talk about the hardest hitting 145er formerly, now hardest hitting 155er Jeremy Stephens versus Mason Jones. So first I'm going to talk about Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens, last we saw him in the UFC, he was on one of the worst losing streaks we'd seen. However, if you have a bit of a discerning eye, right, you look at those losses and they're all against really good fighters. Right, like his last loss in the UFC, he got Kimura'd pretty quickly, but it was by Mateus Gamrot, and all of his fights were pretty high level. And so even though he has losses, it's like, you know what I mean? You have to have a bit more of a holistic perspective when you look at them. However, he then went on to PFL, where he looked like shit. Like, he still looked bad against dodgy PFL talent. Since then, he's come into bare knuckle boxing fame, where he became the champ, signed to the GFL. The UFC said, fuck you, GFL, because GFL basically, before they folded, they released a statement saying they had signed Jeremy Stephens, and Jeremy Stephens was like, I'll fight, but I don't think it got signed. And then the UFC said, hey, Jeremy Stevens, do you want to come fight at UFC Des Moines, Iowa? Like, they basically were trying to fuck up the GFL. And Jeremy Stevens is a name. He's fun. So the UFC's kind of like, why not? And he's fighting against Mason Jones. He was previously in the UFC. And if you look at his run, it's like, poor Mason Jones. He has I think he fought Mike Davis. I think he has a win over David Onama. And then, like a something fuck off fight that, like, was called off. And then he lost to Ludovic Klein. Ludovic Klein is in a fight with Matthias Gamrot coming up to get for a ranking. Mike Davis is probably like a top 25 lightweight when he's actually fighting. And David Onama just got a number beside him. That's a pretty fucking tough first run. Since that run, he went back to the Cage Warriors scene, and he's got a bunch of wins. Straight up, Jeremy Stevens is old as shit. He hasn't been training MMA. Mason Jones takes this seriously. Mason Jones, probably by KO. I just don't trust Jeremy Stevens' chin. I think he'll try to make it a slugfest, but I think he's just going to be too past it versus a guy like Mason Jones who still wants to be here. The odds are fair. It's basically Jeremy Stevens got brought in to fuck over the GFL, and now he gets to get beat up by Mason Jones, which would embarrass the GFL for having tried to bring in Jeremy Stevens. That's my opinion. It's a little conspiratorial for a fight breakdown, but Mason Jones all day, every day, Monday to Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So, I'm going to have another somewhat controversial opinion on this fight. Smotherman is the dog of the week. If you watch this fight with Jake Hadley, Jake Hadley's trying to shoot takedowns, Smotherman stuffs them and just kind of outboxes Jake Hadley. Even gets a point taken away from Jake Hadley. Pretty great fight from Cameron Smotherman. He did get slept out by Charalampos Grigoriou, but I think that's more so of a fluke win by Charalampos than it says about Smotherman. And people have been loving him. But know who I love more than Cameron Smotherman? Sergey Sidhi. So, I'm going to break down Sergey Sidhi. This is going to be like when I broke down Steve Erceg. If you know, not that I have a viewer base, but if you watch that, everyone's talking about the grappling. I'm like, shut up. He's not a grappler. Sergey Sidhi is a fucking phenomenal striker. The problem with Sergey Sidhi is he's fucking stupid, right? Sergey Sidhi takes the first full round and a half to try to figure out the range, your tendencies, what you're going to throw, your combinations. And once he does, he beats you up. And he puts you in the fucking matrix. But the problem is he drops the first round and a half waiting to figure you out before he actually does anything. So, first fight on the Contender Series against Roman Tavares. Because I'm just going to break it down from here. Early stoppage, whatever. They rebook it in the UFC. Because Ramon, in the meanwhile, gets the win over Cortavius Romeus. In that fight, CD just kind of loses the first round. Like I'm saying, kind of like watching it happen, just kind of being shitty. Halfway through the second round, he gets a nasty cut. But then by then, he's figured out the Roman Tavares timing, and he starts beating him up. Roman Tavares can't really touch him. And he wins the round. In the third round, more the same. Just a way more talented fighter. But the problem was, with that cut, it gave such a bad visual that he lost the fight by split decision, in a decision that I think is very controversial, and people have talked about that have watched Sergey Sidhi's career. They're like, wow, he got that win stole from him. Luckily, in his next fight, if we're being real here, he got a little bit of a present from the judges. Against Garrett Armfield, first round, Garrett Armfield's outstriking him because Sergey Sidhi just can't fucking do anything. Like, Sergey Sidhi, for how tall he is, you're kind of thinking, okay, when's the teep coming out? When's a nice little jab? When's he going to control the range? And he's like, nah, I'm throwing in knees and elbows. Like, he wants to get in gritty right away. But basically, he just kind of negates every advantage he has. And so it allows Garrett Armfield to kind of fuck him up a bit. Then Sergey Sidhi, they kind of like had some weird grappling exchange where Sergey Sidhi gets some really nice submission attempts off on Garrett Armfield. And it makes round one really close. Because Garrett Armfield did outstrike Sergey Sidhi, but if you want to go by the ultimate nerd damage criteria score, Sergey Sidhi did get really close to finishing the fight with some of his subs. Like, they looked pretty nasty. Right? Second round, loses the first half of the second round, right? Watching it like a dumbass. Second half of the second round, puts his fucking ass in the matrix again. Like there's some striking exchanges where you're like, oh my god, Sergey Sidhi is special. Third round starts and Garrett Armfield says, we're not striking. Sergey Sidhi is a really good striker. And he wrestles Sergey Sidhi up and easily wins the third. Right? Sorry City gets a split decision. If I'm honest, he's lucky the fight was in Canada. But against Cameron Smotherman, Smotherman's not going to try and take him down, right? This is going to be a pretty straight-up striking duel. But this fight's hard to break down because the thing is, Smotherman will win the first round. He probably might even win the second round for at least the first half of it. Like, City will take a lot of time to figure out the striking before he actually starts putting it together. But, I got to look at this fight holistically and how I think it's going to go. And I think I got to pick who do I think would win if they both came out as good as they could. And because of that, I'm going to pick Sergey City. I think if Sergey City can get his reads going earlier, if he comes out by the end of the first round with his reads, and maybe even in the first can maybe hit him with something nice, you know what I mean? Maybe like make the scoring close. And then the second round, he can really start getting his game going. It will be a Sergey City fight. I like Sergey City here. I'm probably like more confident on this than most, but like pretty low confidence still. However, if you want to bet on the Sergey City side, that's what I will be doing. Wait. The money is all coming on Cameron Smotherman. The odds will probably flip or go to about evens. About, like, you know what I'm saying? Right around when the fight starts, it'll probably be minus 110, minus 110. So I'm going to wait for that to bet on Sergey City. But Sergey City is the far more talented striker. You know what I mean? Like, if Sergey City was striking with Jake Hadley, he'd probably get taken down. But in the striking, he would fuck him up bad. Okay, Montel Jackson versus Daniel Marcos. So Montel Jackson, elite wrestling background, ridiculous power, inactive, slept the Mont Blanc shot in 13 seconds. Yeah. Daniel Marcos, 17-0, undefeated, but all of his fights are fucking close. His one fight that wasn't close was against John Castaneda, but in the video that I didn't upload, but you could even go back when John Castaneda pulled out against Chris Gutierrez before, I kind of said that I think it was more so a Castaneda thing than a Daniel Marcos thing. And I think you saw in that last fight where basically Castaneda doesn't quite shoot takedowns and kind of just lets himself get beat up on the feet by a more talented striker. And every other fight other than Castaneda, Daniel Marcos has not looked impressive, if we're being honest, right? I think this fight is where the closeness ends. And Montel Jackson is probably going to beat him. Montel Jackson, if he lands on Daniel Marcos, which he will probably get pretty close to knocking him out, or he'll have the moments. And in the wrestling, where Daniel Marcos has looked really good before, Montel Jackson will be better. And this is a little conspiratorial, but I don't give a fuck. If Montel Jackson has a close fight with Daniel Marcos, you know what? This fight's in fucking Iowa. Montel Jackson has a wrestling background. He's American fighting against a Peruvian guy in fucking, you know what I'm saying, Trump land. Do you think that the American crowd is not going to basically cheer Montel Jackson's way into a dubious split decision victory if it comes to it? I think you're crazy if you think that doesn't happen. I like Montel Jackson. If Marcos makes the fight close, which he probably will if he doesn't get slept, I still like Montel Jackson. Montel Jackson's way more talented. If he was more active, I think he'd be one of the biggest stories in the UFC. But for whatever reason, he isn't. Look at that reach, too. It's ridiculous. Marcos, I don't think he's particularly skilled. Marcos is just one of the maxed out Peruvian fighters where they have like these crazy chins, crazy stamina, and moderate skill. And he's kind of maxed that out. But I think against Montel Jackson, it doesn't matter that he's the most alpha Peruvian, right? Montel Jackson should be able to have the moments. Should be able to knock him down. Should be able to clinch up the fight. And really solidify himself in the top 15. Okay, Ponzinibbio versus D-Rod. So, I'm going to break this one down pretty quick. They're both old guys, but I think people kind of like Ponzinibbio more than D-Rod, so they're picking Ponzinibbio. But I have questions with Ponzinibbio. I think against Carlson Harris, I don't really love it. I don't really like a draw with Muslim Salikov, who's still good, but I don't love Muslim Salikov draw. And he's going against D-Rod, who I think people are looking way too far into his previous fights. Like, if you think about it, really, 2 fights ago, he had Calvin Gastelum, who Calvin Gastelum fucked up his weight so bad that they fought at 85, and he easily beat D-Rod. But that's basically at a how many ever pound weight disadvantage you want to get into. And Calvin Gastelum's also a very good fighter. Like, I think Calvin Gastelum would also beat the shit out of Ponzinibbio. Now, the Alex Morono fight with D-Rod, yeah, it's not a good look. But Alex Morono, who comes out usually pretty chubby, and confused looking, actually came out pretty fucking fit against D-Rod. Like, he looked like a real athlete against D-Rod. And D-Rod, I think, was caught off guard by the fact that it was like a Alex Morono taking his career seriously kind of fight. But once D-Rod figured it out, he put the boxing together. He looked good. I just think that D-Rod, I just like his striking more. I think Ponzinibbio just will probably just get out decisionated, honestly. I just think that this is really close. I just think I like more what I see from D-Rod. I think D-Rod's not just been fighting the old heads. He's been having the fights with the youngins and looked okay. I don't like the Alex Morono fight, but I think this is a pretty good opportunity for D-Rod. De Ridder versus Bo Nickel. You know, I've just actually picked another dog. I have quite a few dogs on this card, and this will be my last. I'm sorry for Bo Nickel Nation, but I love De Ridder here. And when I say the love, I mean, I think that De Ridder wins at a very close margin. I'm going to spend more time on this than the main event for sure. But De Ridder has not good striking, but guess what? Bo Nickel doesn't have good striking either. I think a lot of people are looking really into the Gerald Meerschaert matchup, but I think it's like, yeah, we just saw Bo Nickel outpoint Paul Craig. Like, I'm sorry. I think Gerald Meerschaert could outstrike Paul Craig. You know, that doesn't move me. And I think when we look at Bo Nickel, who has he fought? I'll tell you who he's fought, because I'm a dork. Jamie Pickett, Val Woodburn, Cody Brundage, and Paul Craig. I'm going to talk about what happened in each fight. Jamie Pickett, bum. Well, not bum, but like not a great fighter, right? And if you watch the tape, he actually cheats and grabs the fence to get the takedown. And now, he still would have got Jamie Pickett out of there early, but that's not really a good look when I think in the modern UFC we have so many questions about American wrestling, right? The fact that you're using a crutch like the fence. Next fight, Val Woodburn, like on like a couple days notice against a regional guy. Do we give a fuck? No. Then his third fight against Cody Brundage. Cody Brundage is fucking horrific. The odds just dropped on Mansour Abdul Malik versus Cody Brundage fight coming up pretty quickly. You know what the odds are? Minus 750 on Mansour. Cody Brundage is fucking just so bad. Can you imagine if De Ridder had Cody Brundage's back like Bo Nickel did? The fight wouldn't go another 30 seconds. Right? And now, I think that Bo Nickel actually had a pretty great fight against Cody Brundage. But, you know, that's not good comp. And his last fight, he has Paul Craig. That could have told us a lot if he had grappled Paul Craig, right? But he struck with Paul Craig. And Paul Craig had a shit fight plan, which I think was basically like, hope Bo Nickel takes you down and then you go for a triangle. And Bo Nickel did have a good game plan. But, you know what I mean? That, like, is that really inspiring you? You know what I mean? Your dead dog could outpoint Paul Craig. De Ridder, pretty good run at one. He lost to Malakin, but Malakin is very, very good. Don't look past Malakin. He comes to the UFC. You know, he takes out Meerschaert. Closer fight than it probably should have been, but, you know, he still got it done. And then he fucking destroys Kevin Holland. The difference between De Ridder and any of Nickel's last opponents is huge. And the difference, too, is De Ridder's going to fucking go for takedowns on Bo Nickel. We're going to see Bo Nickel's grappling get tested. Now, with a modern American wrestling in the UFC, a lot of times you see them struggle offensively just because they don't have the jiu-jitsu know-how to really make things happen. But defensively, they scramble great and they do have great takedown defense. So I think Bo Nickel, if he wants it on the feet, will keep it on the feet. But this is the first time we're seeing that even get tested. We've not seen Bo Nickel's grappling get tested by anyone of any skill level. You know, I think you're asking a lot of Bo Nickel to say you're going to outgrapple De Ridder. And I think it's like we also are assuming that Bo Nickel will easily outstrike De Ridder, right? And now the reason, despite the fact I think that De Ridder is a much better grappler than Bo Nickel, that I'd still say it's a very close fight, is if they are stuck on the feet, Bo Nickel's probably better. Not by a huge margin by any means, but he's probably better. Let's not lie to ourselves. You know, let's not get delusional, per se. And Bo Nickel follows a good game plan. Like, you know what I mean? If you watch him against Cody Brundage, you know his ass got told to fucking sub him. And so he doesn't posture up, which is annoying, but having a fighter that follows a game plan, you love it. The last thing, too, is, he's going to stay there. He's going to have energy. De Ridder gasses out like a motherfucker. He's huge, and he suffers from it. You know, so if it's the fucking third round and DeRitter's been working Bo Nickel on the cage, getting some takedowns, maybe it's like 1-1, pretty close rounds, DeRitter might be fucking spent, but Bo Nickel will still be there. So I like DeRitter because I think in the striking it's pretty close. I think DeRitter will cause some scrambles in the grappling, and I think DeRitter could find a sub, if not just kind of dominate Bo Nickel. I think he's also going to look so much bigger than Bo Nickel in there, and although on the feet, I don't think you'll see a difference. On the grappling, DeRitter is going to look like fucking phenomenal. DeRitter is one of those few fighters who I think his fundamental understanding of grappling is next level. Like when you watch him against Gerald Meerschaert, he's just going for shit that probably shouldn't work, and it doesn't. But the fact he has the confidence to just be kind of going for his silly shit, it makes me really like him in this spot. So I like DeRitter. I have some money on DeRitter, but this fight's pretty close. So although I've been glazing DeRitter, if Bo Nickel goes out there, his grappling's as good as you think it is. This fight tightens up. If Bo Nickel's striking has improved, this fight tightens up. If DeRitter looks like dog shit, you know what I mean? But I think there's so many more questions to ask of Bo Nickel for this fight, for him to win this fight, that you can't pick him. Next, last but not least, Corey Sandhagen versus Davison. I'm not going to spend much time on this fight because there's not much to say. Corey Sandhagen is going to beat Figueiredo. Figueiredo, he had a really good run when he came in, smudged Jose Font, destroyed Cody Garbrandt, but then I think he starts seeing the chinks in the armor. Against Chito Vera, he did win, but he found a takedown in the first round after getting them defended, and he couldn't really ever find another one. After that, he lost all the striking minutes to Chito Vera, which is not a really good look. And then in the third round, after a close first round, which he clinched, in a close striking third, where he was obviously about to lose, or on the course to lose, he finds a knockdown. That knockdown gives him the fight. It's fun, you know what I mean? People are like happy for Figgy because he's kind of been getting slept on by the UFC. But then he gets Petr Yan. And all those red flags, like losing the minutes, not being able to find the takedowns at will, kind of get exposed. Where in the striking, he did find a pretty good knockdown, I think, at one point. Like a flash knockdown on Petr Yan. But other than that, got destroyed. He couldn't even get takedowns. Petr Yan was fighting takedowns on Figgy. Now, he's fighting Corey Sandhagen. This is a pretty fun fight, even though I think it won't be close. It will be fun. Corey Sandhagen, what Petr Yan did in the striking to Figgy, Sandhagen's going to do worse. Like, he's going to have such a good range advantage. Figueiredo's going to just have trouble getting inside. Sandhagen's going to dance around. He's going to make him look stupid on the feet. Figgy might find some takedowns, but I don't think Sandhagen will get hit by them. His grappling has improved so much. I think that he is going to stay safe from the big power shots. Figgy's so old now. You know what I mean? This is going to be a little sad to watch. You're going to watch this fight and you're going to leave it like, oh my God, please retire. So Sandhagen, this will be fun, but Sandhagen is going to fucking look like a Greek god against some fucking plebe in this fight. Thank you for watching for my Des Moines picks. If you liked it, please subscribe. Please hit the like. Leave me a comment. Let me know how you feel. Okay? And watch the PFL card if I upload this before the PFL card comes out. Because the PFL cards have been pretty fun as of recent. So thank you. And I'll see you guys next week to break down the Canada card, where I'm going to be really biased towards Canadians. Bye.